All righty. Good morning, gentlemen. Good morning, Mantra community. Good to be here today, bright and early here in Seattle, Washington. So it's 6 a.m. Pacific time. We did this very early for everyone around the world watching. You know, the Mantra community is global. Usually when we started off, we go and ask in the comments, where's everyone dialing in from? And you see literally people from all over the world. So please do drop a comment on where you guys are at, whether it's out in Asia, Europe, Africa, or in North America, or South, I guess, for that matter. We have people quite literally all over the place. But we have some, very esteemed individuals that you are already aware of, and a new face that you guys are going to meet today. We're excited to share a little bit more about the big news that came out yesterday. So welcome, Pat O'Meara, CEO and Chairman of Inveniam Capital Partners, to the Community Connect. You guys are very familiar with Pat. He's become a very big fan favorite from the Mantra community. Okay, we already see some, look, we have Netherlands, Spain, Zurich, Pakistan, Japan, Turkey, India, France, Sri Lanka, USA, Nigeria, Portugal. Quite literally all over the place. It is truly amazing to see everyone from all over. But great to be here today with Pat, and also a new face, Jean Pauli. So we're going to talk a bit more about who this man is and his relevance, but maybe just, Pat, do you want to just do a quick round of introductions?
Sure. Yeah. First off, thanks for having me on this. It's great to be with all of you. I see Turkey and Gibraltar here as well as new countries. That's awesome. And I'm super excited for JP, what we're going to be building together, right? And I think this merger of our two firms and of this talent into a single vision for execution is going to be good for the global markets. We think particularly in transforming private markets, bringing liquidity in, changing how people store value and transfer value. This is going to be enormously important, this combination. So we're super excited to be with you. And I'm also excited to bring my good friend, Jean Pauli. And we're going to spend some more time with Jean Pauli in a minute. But Jean Pauli, why don't you just give maybe a couple quick personal highlights of kind of who you are. And we're going to be spending a couple minutes really diving into your career and what you've done. But Jean and I have become good friends over the last little bit. And Jean Pauli, we're excited that you're going to be joining our project.
Well, first, I just wanted to, congratulate both of you guys. This is an amazing news, the announcements yesterday. JP, we met many months at this point, and I really, the interaction with you and Pat has been amazing. So again, congratulations. Super excited. About myself, I actually, I was born in Lebanon, and I spent a lot of time in France. And then I moved to the beautiful Seattle area. I worked for a lot of time for Microsoft. But what I do, and I'm today the CEO of Tokigami, and what I do for a living is I know how to transform documents to data at scale. So I'm the guy who created the thing called XML that many of you maybe have heard about, but this is around a big vision that I always had, which is to transform business documents into usable data. That's what I do, Pat, in short. Yeah.
Yeah, that's perfect. And we're super excited to have you, and I think the entire Mantra community, as they learn more about you and what you've done in your career and how we're going to connect the capabilities that you've built with Inveniam and now Mantra. It's going to be an exciting time here for the markets.
It is very exciting.
Yeah.
So usually the communities, when we do these things, like to hear alpha. So there's definitely going to be some alpha as it pertains to Tokigami later in the broadcast. So I think while Pat and I are talking a little bit about the news that came out yesterday, you can do some Google searches and some AI searches on Jean Pauli and some of the amazing technologies that he's created that have truly been foundational to the internet and to data and documents, and how they're going to also be transforming in the world of artificial intelligence that we're currently all living in, and obviously what Inveniam is really building in. So maybe taking a step back, yesterday we had a pretty big announcement, and we're very excited to announce that Mantra has been acquired and will be merging with Inveniam. But this hasn't been this has been coming along for a while now. So Pat and I got to meet each other, early last year, after a very traumatic and trying situation that we were going through, and Pat and Inveniam stepped up and supported us in a time of need, which I for one am greatly appreciative of. I know the team and the community is as well. But we started developing a relationship that was multifaceted over the last 12 to 15 months of really getting to know each other, understand what we're building respectively, how we can be building and operating things together. And one of the things that I think I particularly appreciated is Inveniam is an operating business. It's not just an investor. They're doing a number of different things within private markets, within tokenization, within AI, that was quite relevant to Mantra. And we also then started to build and operate and work on a number of different initiatives together. For example, the Inveniam chain L2, which is the first L2 on Mantra, which launched a month or two ago, and has started to develop commercial use cases. So with that backdrop, maybe Pat, could you tell a little bit about how you saw this transition from just being an initial initial investment, which was a sizable one, into a full-blown kind of merger acquisition and kind of a combining of forces, so to speak?
Yeah. So I think to do that, we really need to tell the Inveniam story a little bit and our own
please
maturation as a company, right? We're 10 years old, coming up on 10 years old. And I had been in the Bitcoin blockchain space, really starting in 14 and 15. Started speaking at Bitcoin conferences and in 15, and really began to understand digital store of value, digital transfer of value. And as we think about Bitcoin as money, and there's a whole conversation around Bitcoin and preserving its identity, the reality is the ability for people to store value in assets that are immune from manipulation and debasement of core currency is what we've been about. And the ability to invest in real assets, right? So to invest in real estate, to invest in private equity, private credit, or in loans to individuals and corporations, and infrastructure assets. These are these data-rich, low-frequency traded assets. So this is not the tokenization of public markets, where you have a centralized data repository, but it is the much larger TAM, or total addressable market, of, let's call it 600 trillion of private markets that don't touch the financial services world as we know it, or Wall Street, right? So it's this enormous market that is that's out there, and the only way for those assets to become part of the global economic marketplace is the ability to trust the data associated with it. And so there's a ton of people focused on AML, KYC, clearing and settling, creating bridges, DeFi solutions. But we've always been focused on the data side of this. How do you have asset owners? And Jean-Paul and I will talk about Tim Berners-Lee in a little bit, because our first conversation was around Tim Berners-Lee. One of our first conversations, who Jean-Paul knows well, and had a lot of really good collaborative work, but also some really fundamental disagreements that Jean-Paul has solved. And what we're doing is very much in line with what he wrote about in Semantic Web, which is the idea that people are going to want to control their own data. They're going to want to index that data. They're going to want to vector embed that data, have it understood, and then interact with agents. Well, to do that, you need a mechanism to prove origin, process, and state of data that is associated with a digital instrument, a token, that represents ownership in an asset like the one that you see reflected behind you, right? Whether it's commercial real estate, multifamily housing. And without the ability to surveil an asset real time, there is no mechanism for secondary trading. And what we want to do is not just create secondary tokenization, but tokenization where there is secondary trading, where there's an underlying ability to, we can hear the traffic outside my window and on JP's balcony. This ability for people to credential their data. And what we're doing is Inveniam is the data operations solution for data-rich, low-frequency trading assets for unstructured document-based data. And probably, I would say, in addition to Inveniam, Docugami is the only other, what I would say, closest entity that has completely additive technology to our technology to enhance the ability for us to understand what is in not structured data that are in databases, not the semi-structured data that we see in JSON files, but really this unstructured document-based data. And that is how private market asset owners communicate with their shareholders. That's how those are serviced. And therein lies the majority of value. And what we're doing is creating the on-ramp for these asset owners to credential their data, surveil their asset, and bring that asset into the global economy to digitize it. And what this is going to do is take the roughly 6.8 billion people on the planet who are not currently participating in the banking rails that we use today in North America as a mechanism to save and transfer value, store value and transfer value in these types of assets that are non-inflating or that are inflating, that won't be debased. And it is this is what Inveniam's been doing for a long time. I'm sorry if that was maybe too much or off track, but this is what we're doing. And the idea being, we want to transform real estate. We want to transform private credit. We want to transform infrastructure. We want to transform private equity. And as we look at these four areas, we are the data solution that's going to partner with data marketplaces and and market operators on multiple chains. But we want to be the solution that is the native chain for the financial instruments and the data being anchored, but then being on many chains because the markets will develop in multiple places. And the idea it's all going to develop on us is ridiculous, but we need a meta chain, a first chain. And anytime you have any security trading, you need redundancy. And what we're doing is saying we are going to be the native Inveniam chain for the data, mantra for the instrument, and then those things will trade in multiple different locations with good data that is surveilled daily and that you can correlate that data to other like assets. This is who Inveniam is. And as we needed to get more and more in sync with the DeFi community, and we needed a partner who had the same vision, the same goals, the human connections that we had with you as a good actor, a good person, hard worker, someone who tells the truth, who works through hard times and difficulties, and the relationships you had in the Middle East were coincided with the relationships we had. And to me, Inveniam as an enterprise solution, we needed to begin the process of open sourcing. You know what I mean? Our tools broadly to the community in a much greater way. And so we wanted to start doing that in conjunction with a team that had an open source solution, a fantastic technology, and we thought we could add a lot of value to, and we thought we could make a bunch of money on the trade, right? And we want everybody in Mantra coming along with us on making money on this trade, right? This is what we want. Sorry, JP, that was a super long answer.
No, I think that's a really helpful context. We want everyone to kind of get the full backstory. I distinctly recall maybe late last year and the beginning of early this year when you kept hinting at me that you wanted to continue to bring the projects closer together. And I think I don't want to say I resisted, but I did take some time to just fully understand what it all meant. What it meant for the Mantra community, what it would mean for our team, what it would mean for the project and the brand, and of course myself as well, and our investors. These are all really important things to me, and I said this to our team internally, but I'll say it publicly as well. I think some of the, let's call them conditions, but that's even maybe a little bit of a strong word. But some of the key things that I cared about, when going through with this deal and this merger and acquisition, was to make sure that those stakeholders were taken care of properly. And I always felt from day one that our interests were aligned, and that you had the same interests in making sure that those key parties were taken care of in the right way. And I think that's something that you guys were all able to see during the announcement, where we said, hey, listen, this is a new thing. Mantra is going to be part of Inveniam, but the Mantra brand will continue. The Mantra chain will continue. The Mantra token will continue. Mantra Finance will continue. Mantra USD will continue. MF Markets, which just launched into the Google Play Store, earlier this week, and soon in the App Store, will continue. So all these things that we were building from a vision perspective will continue. I will continue. The team will continue. So this continuity was really important, and I think that's something that the community should feel good about, because even though there's a change and there will be more change in the future, changes it can be a really good thing, particularly when you feel like this is a 1 + 1 = 3 opportunity, which I think we all firmly believe it is, or in this case 1 + 1 + 1 with Jean Pauli, so equals 4. But I think we're excited about what this is going to bring, and at the same time maintain that business as usual for the community. So we're going to continue building the same vision, and even probably at a more expansive reach, given the private market asset focus, which is a massive addressable market, and not to mention all the things that you guys are doing with AI. So maybe on that note, we'll kind of transition it over a little bit so we can start talking to Jean Pauli about Dokugami, his background, and how these technologies are going to transform Inveniam, Dokugami, and what we're doing at Inveniam Chain and Mantra going forward. How's that sound, Pat?
Yeah, it's perfect. And JP, we are, one of the things that we want to do is invest with you in building a global community that's using these technologies. And part of that is investing in the tools that others not only can use, but they can build upon, right? We want to build a community of builders. And Jean Pauli, this is a story of your life, right? You have been a builder, and if it's okay, I'd love for you to maybe give a quick introduction of yourself, a little bit more so, right? So you went to France from Lebanon during the Civil War, and you studied at quite a storied place, right? And got some good degrees. Tell us about, give us the if it's all right, 2-3 minute Jean Pauli story.
Well, you're too kind. Look, first, I'm really excited to see the community here. I always love worked with communities all up across the world. I believe in openness. When I came from Lebanon to France, I was lucky to study in a school created by INRIA. INRIA is like the very known research labs in France, and many people who do AI today came from that. And so I studied in that school, and Gilles Kahn, who is a very big researcher, took me under his wing at that time and invited me to join startups of INRIA. So I spent 10 years, I was in France, and I worked with really top level researchers. I mean, we're talking about like Nobel Prize level people. I was so lucky to work with these people. And then they taught me a lot. And one of the things that they taught me, and that's kind of a funny thing, is to look at, those are, at documents, and documents for people could be really boring, just like, what is in a document? Well, my life is in documents. If you look at documents in a different way, like, for example, let's take examples that really speak to this community: loan agreement, commercial lease agreements, like anything that where basically you write contract or business documents that really run the world. Those documents could be 20, 50, 500-page long page, and they could be a lot of them, hundreds of thousands of them, right? Same thing in healthcare, that's completely different domain, all the patient notes. Same thing into insurance, same thing into literally, organization of big companies. Like, those are business documents. That's how the world runs on them. And those are literally not in databases. And when people tell you where is the data in an enterprise, classically, it's less than 15% in databases. Everything is on these big documents. So I've been working on these things and try to understand them and as data. So when I look at those documents, it's a long time. I actually don't see them as text or as raw things or like what you see in Markdown today or these things. I see them are literally semi-structured trees related, linked by links. And so that drove me when Microsoft hired me, because I was one of the first working with on internet technologies, obviously after the World Wide Web, arrived very early. I moved here to Redmond, which is, headquarters of Microsoft. I live in Kirkland, and helped create the original, browser that Microsoft went with. You just help them. But most importantly, I told them, look, we need to go and create a language that enables data interchange across the world. And so that was my background on that I used to create XML with Friends of the Industries. And at that time, nobody heard about these things. And that enabled e-commerce to start. It enabled literally a lot of core technologies that today people take for granted. It enabled things like JSON to be derived from that, or other, and so once I basically, started and XML became this thing, then I continued. I created a product called InfoPath that basically shipped in the Office suite, and where it was the very beginning of the tools that enable regular users to interact with what they think about as a document. There's actually really data, and it was outputting XML. And then my dream was always to go and, take those things to the world bigger. And so I was able to convince the people at Microsoft, and I worked for maybe many years, to create the DocX, XLSX, and Power PPTX format. The X stands for XML. It's actually a zip code. It's a zip file, and you can extract it. And that enabled a lot of the AI tools today to be able to go open these things and understand what's inside of them and learn from them. This whole all the LLMs things. So the other thing is, you told me a few minutes. I am a big open source guy. Because I grew up since I was in a university with researchers, Unix and Linux and all these things was like, that's what we breathed, and we grew up with that. Like, it's not like, so I came to Microsoft, and that, of course, it was a different thing. So I always worked with communities to create those standards, the XML and other things, but also to interact with code. And so I created the open source subsidiary of Microsoft at that time, where it was really bizarre, right? And we worked a lot with open source communities, and now obviously Microsoft bought GitHub, and now all of this is daily a job. But just to tell you, for my passions are understanding documents as data, and then work with communities in the open as open source. So that's kind of the two things I do.
And Jean-Paul, one of the things is, Inveniam, we are in the business of noticing that there's been a change of state of data, in these many, many data repositories, identifying that, indexing that new document, vector embedding it, anchoring it on chain, right, on an automated basis across, multiple data stores associated where documents are created, and then relating that to other data sets. And this is what we do. And we use AI, and we facilitate asset owners and data owners to engage with forms of automation, smart contracts, AI agents, things like that, right? And as we do that, the forms of automation inherit the rights of the user, right? So the agent can only see the documents that they're allowed to see associated with the buildings that they're an investor in, right? So it's fully permissioned from the asset owner. They allow people to browse in their systems, so that asset's ready for sale 24/7, 365. But the problem is, we have 10, templates that we work in across a wide variety of these private market assets. We've got another 6 that are in process but are not yet perfected and aren't working at scale, where, private credit agreements, leases, appraisals, we can quickly extract that data. We think, as far as I know, faster than anybody in the world at scale with full attribution to the underlying document without leaking anything. But the reality is, we just do that with a certain number of documents. And what we were trying to do was solve this ontology problem, right? And tell everybody, what is the ontology problem? And then how do we think about not just Dokugami, but this next language that we're going to be releasing next month, document graph markup language, that allows agents to interact with any document that they find and will become the native, I think, language of agents globally interacting with documents.
Yeah, so that's what I basically, when I left Microsoft, I created Dokugami, and that's what I started working on a few years ago with colleagues, that's ex people from Microsoft, and also researchers who are published papers and all of these things. So the problem is the following. Today, when you think about anybody who has been working with LLMs and chat, the classic way things work in your head, think about it, is you think about, you have documents, you send them to an LLM, and then you chat with them. There are two levels, right? Send them to the LLM and you chat.
We lost Jean
Well,
Pauli.
there is something to start.
Hey, Jean Pauli, we've lost your audio, brother.
Understand, since at least a year, let's say.
Hey, Jean Pauli,
is you need information, and many people today are using Markdown as this intermediate process.
Yes. We're not catching you, brother. Your internet is bad, and we missed maybe the last 30 seconds. And so
sorry.
Can you give a quick recap of that? And then we are 30 minutes in, so we're going to start answering questions that have come in. But quickly, if you could quickly hit this.
Yes.
Go ahead, Jean Pauli.
So when you speak about AI in general, when you treat with documents, the architecture is at two levels. You have an LLM, you send documents, and you chat with it. What we know is many more people starting understanding that you need an intermediate level in the middle, where you go take documents, you transform them to a format, and then that format, basically, you chat with it, okay? And that people are talking about it in general because you want to have agents interacting with data the quicker possible. So this is being called the semantic layer. When you have data coming from databases, that's easy because you basically, easy. You have people creating product that unify this from databases, give it to agents. When it comes to documents, there is nothing yet. So I have been working since a long time at Dokugami to create what we're calling DGML, document graph markup language, which basically enables, of course, AI to transform any business documents into an XML-based format called DGML, which basically speaks the domain of the document. So if you are in insurance, it speaks insurance for any kind of insurance. If you are in loans, it speaks loans. If it's on a commercial lease, it speaks. So it is domain native document format. Let's think about it that way. But it works for any domain. And so, Patrick, you were talking about the 10 or 12 or 15, templates you have. That is independently of anything. And the thing of that is what it enables you is, because it is very granular, it means it actually describes the content of an entire document, or actually many documents. Then what you can do is take a portion of that document, like, for example, all the information about the specific of the loan, for example, or just who are the renters, all right? Like, this is very specific information, right? And then now all of a sudden, we can start thinking about the overall problem that the world has, which is trust. In order to do trust, you need to be able, and that's when I started working with Pat and of course with JP here, is the idea is we're going to go and take those documents and enable portion of this document, like a portion of this XML tree, to be anchored on chains. And now you see why we're discussing, the three of us in the same room here, is because that's why I found my partners in crime, if you want, JP and Patrick, because it starts making sense. We are announcing all of this, that we are basically open sourcing the DGML core technologies literally in July, and with examples interacting with Inveniam and with Inveniam chain and mantra and all these things, with real examples of what I'm telling you, which is really exciting, because all of a sudden you have a distributed databases that support any kind of documents, and then portion of it are trusted and anchored.
And so, JP, I'm going to throw it back to you in a second, but fundamentally, you have these giant data companies that deal with structured and semi-structured data, but there is no global leader in unstructured document-based data. Inveniam and Docugami together are we desire to be the global leader in connecting the ability to index that in your own data security envelope. Then vector embed it, what's inside it, and then create semantic chunks inside it. So chunks that have a relationship to one another, that are more granularly identified what's in there. And then not only do we anchor the document on chain, we anchor the semantic chunk on chain, meaning both Inveniam chain and mantra chain. Absolutely. And what we're going to do is, with the agents, the ability to prove I got this from this document, and we turn that document into a fully searchable registry of data without leaking it. And we can now not just do search using byte range, but semantic range and correlation through semantic matching. And what we do is get much better data, much better correlation of like private market assets without leaking this data anywhere. This is how private markets will interact with each other, how private market structuring of products will be structured. And we are going to have the on-ramp of data to this global market all around the world, of the agents that are going to do the work, bringing the documents into something that is understood by the machine language. And that is going to interact with Inveniam chain and mantra chain, doing literally thousands and tens of thousands and millions and billions of anchors on chain as the agents prove origin, process, and state of data. And as we do that, suddenly people who work with mantra are going to be able to create digital instruments representing a financial interest in a real asset, understand the state of that asset, but not only that, the history and the continuing performance of that asset, and prove it on chain in a trustless environment where they have agents checking things back and forth. This is a transformation, and we want to be the global data leader, and the monetization happens on chain of the anchoring as people begin to use, Jean-Paul, your excellent technology embedded with what Inveniam has built, and on top of JP and your community, if that makes sense to everybody, right? We want to be the unstructured document data company that relates to financial instruments, that then where those markets are going to form, not just on us, not just on mantra, but on Avalanche and Polygon and Sui and Aptos and think of all the decentralized chains. We're going to be the solution set that they rely on when they have markets that develop for the mortgage or the mezz or the consumer debt or the infrastructure equity or the private equity or the fund structure or interval funds. And these markets will develop in multiple places, but they'll all be interacting with us as the source of truth, of source of data and correlation of data to that digital instrument, right? And that's the place we want to play in the global market. JP, that was a really long intro between Jean-Paul and I, and I hope that was okay.
No, that was perfect. I mean, I think you touched on it a little bit, but one thing that we want everyone to understand is just the scale of what this means, and how that pertains to on-chain transactions and usage of a network. I think we're already starting to see it, where the internet itself is having more searches from and usage from agents than it is from real human beings, and that will start translating on-chain imminently. So there's a few really exciting things that we're working on with an MCP server on Inveniam chain. I won't go into too much information about what that means just yet, but that's something that's going to be a channel and a funnel for distribution of these technology stacks that enable people to very easily utilize their agents via the major providers to interrogate these data documents, to build applications around it, to create markets around it, and then of course all this happens on chain. So this data combined with the kind of the blockchain network that Inveniam's creating is the future, in my opinion. And I think I think the three of us are all very aligned on that vision, which is great to see. So go ahead, Pat. Yeah, please.
Well, one of the things I wanted to say directly to the community is, and we are doing this where we want to embrace the mantra community. You know what I mean? We are launching a new token, this Inveniam token. Our goal is to have the TGE event in Q4. We got a lot of people working on it. There's a lot of cool projects that we're and partnerships and users that we are going to be announcing through the next couple of months. But the first thing we want to do is we wanted to acknowledge that we are building and launching this from the heart of the mantra community, with mantra at its core. And JP, is this the right time to kind of talk about this?
Sure.
Or should we?
Yeah.
So the goal is next week we're going to open up a mechanism with JP where we want to acknowledge anybody who is a mantra holder who'd like to be an investor in our SAFT, where you guys can come in. And anybody who comes in, we want to give you the very first people the best deal on this as we launch it, where we'll be giving credit for 3 cents per mantra token, right? So that's meaningfully above where it is market today. But we want anybody who says, "Hey, I want to participate in this, come on in." And JP will be doing that announcement directly with more, the terms and conditions and all that kind of stuff out there. But where we say anybody who wants to come in and say, "I want to participate in the Inveniam token," and both of these are going to continue to exist. But anybody who says, "I want to come in," we'll take that in at a 3 cents credit against the launch as we do this. And we'll give more of that information out on Monday. But and later today, we're going to be making another announcement. And next week, we got 2 big announcements. And then John Powley, we're going to be releasing, what John Powley calls his 4th of July release. Go ahead. Do you want to comment on that?
So no. I mean, we are announcing literally in an hour. There's a press release going, our partnership between Inveniam and Dokigami. And because Inveniam has the actual financial scenarios, and we have actually the DGML technology. So we're really partnering since many months now. It's going to be sometimes in July. And I'm really hoping people from the community, I'm sure we will come to an AMA, JP with you and others, right? But we really we are starting this open sourcing, and we really want to have feedback from the community, because we want this to establish this as an open standard, open source. But what we need is, I did that a lot of time in my life. What we need first is to go and do a first release, get feedback, understand all the bugs that we're going to have, get all the GitHub stuff, fix it, continue, do it again, week after week until they start getting really solid. And I really would love everybody to, participate, give us feedback, anything you want. I mean, because at the end of the day, it is important so it can have adoption at scale.
And John Powley, we have on your team, Inveniam, we've got a good sized team. We've got some world-class individuals on our team. We're going to announce some new people joining not only our board, but our team. But Jean Powley, you have an amazing science team. You have an amazing product team. You have an amazing tech and engineering team, right? You have an amazing sales team and a go-to-market team. And these are all world-class scientists who have written papers, who participate in the academic communities, who've been building at major places, Meta, Oracle, Microsoft. Most of the people came from Microsoft, right? That's
but also have scientists. A lot of scientists who originally came from France and are in the US, but other places. And so, we are a deep tech company. It's a pleasure, really. I mean, we are a small company, but really, I would say mighty, because it's a lot of and so really interested. We are document people, right? Like, this is what we do, business documents, obviously, but working with you guys is really the missing link here, because to go really do agentic at scale for documents, you need multiple things here at this point. I mean, we are beyond. We started using transformers just in 2018, for God's sake. I mean, this is old news. Everybody does LLMs, right? Now we're at the second level, next level, which is the semantic layer. Everybody has been complaining about using Markdown. I mean, for people who really try to do, because with markup, you lose all the structure, you don't have the semantics, you don't have any of this. So we need all of this. What we need also is proof of origin. Like what we need also is people looking at the document today and a document in 3 weeks and say, wait a minute, this is the same loan condition you told me about. And we cannot do that just by, just winging it, or everybody has their own solution. What you need is a chain that is completely international and, across decentralized. So you can do that at scale between multiple parties, right? And so that's what was missing. And then we are now at the next level of the AI revolution. I mean, all this other stuff is now old news, and AI every week is an old news, right? So we're the next thing, right? Yeah.
It is not a thing. It is an integration of an ecosystem of technologies that were created disparately, that we're knitting together, right? That must allow private market assets to trade with real understanding of the condition of the state of entropy of that asset. And if we're going to understand that state of entropy of a physical asset in order for it to trade and have real price discovery of the condition of that, we must interact with this. So your technology, interacting with Inveniam's technology, interacting with what Mantra has built, the MF markets, right?
Those are the three things. That's right.
Yeah, we must have that. We must have perps. We must have the ability to create indices. And JP, can I go 1 second a little bit deeper into that, right? And why perps matter? When you're trading a share in IBM or a share of Apple, there's a lot of comps in the market. But when you trade things that are unique, the more homogenous the asset, the more things that are like it, the easier it is. So multifamily, hospitality, multifamily housing, that's easier to trade because there's a lot of like assets. But as assets become more individual and heterogeneous, you need to create all sorts of mechanisms, and a portfolio is more heterogeneous, meaning it's not like everything else. What you have to do is create a hedge. And I worked on Wall Street, and and one of my first jobs was working creating derivatives around single stock risk management. So bespoke derivatives in order to collar it and lend against it. And when something's unique and you can't really hedge it directly, you have to create a proxy for that hedge, other like assets. And so what we need to be able to do is create, listen, this asset is owned by a big company. It's worth 600 million or $1 billion or 3 billion. And literally, I want to hedge it. How do I hedge it? You can't hedge it directly because there's nothing like it trading in the world. But what you can do is create an index of other like assets that in the aggregate create a correlation that is quite high in attribute. And then what you do is you create that index, you short that index of like assets that are trading in the market, and then you can literally lock in a downside value, which allows you to insure, reserve, hedge, constructive, all sorts of functions. And for us to do this, we must be able to correlate assets on their performance data, create an index, and then create a perp of that index to that asset that others can participate in this as they're beginning to hedge idiosyncratic assets. This is enormous. So the ability to have perps, the ability to create indices, the ability to correlate one asset to the other, the ability to correlate the data function to another, and it all begins understanding what's in the document, how those documents flow through the life cycle of that asset, roll up into a portfolio, connect into a digital instrument that's going to trade. This is what we're doing for our clients. I'll use, we have the same, somebody was mentioning about Binance, right? We joke, last time I saw CZ, JP, which is not all the time, but last time I saw him in Abu Dhabi, we were joking that we think we're related somehow because we have the same in-laws, right? Because his main new investor is my largest investor, right? And we were joking about what they're like as in-laws, right? As investors and on our board. And the reality is, as Binance goes into the trading of these tokenized public markets, we are going to create a mechanism for the data sets around private markets to be related to those things that have many more data points, the public markets, and then correlate them so they can be understood and traded. And we want the liquidity from all those deepest liquidity pools to flow into these two markets. And if that's $600 trillion TAM, even 50 trillion of it begins to engage with the public markets because of these technologies. Katie bar the door. We're the largest unstructured document-based data company in the world. And by the way, the biggest data companies in the world on the structured side, those companies all are denominated in the trillions, right? We want to be the unstructured document data company relating those to private market assets as the first real vertical. JP, sorry that I don't mean to get too far into what we're doing and why we're doing, but I think it's super important.
Absolutely, I think it's important, and I think it also gives a lot of kind of history and stories and personality to the relationship. So all of it is well received, and I think the community loves to see that stuff.
Yes.
We are, about 45 minutes in, getting to the top of the hour. So maybe we can open up for a few questions from the community first, and go from there and round out the rest of the discussion. So Wild Crypto X, she's asking about, is that G42 AI Binance main investor, Pat? Maybe Omi Albert can pull up the question onto the screen if that's possible, so everyone can see it.
So yeah, that's right. G42 is an investor in us. G42 through MGX. MGX is Mubadala, also one of our shareholders. G is G42. X is collaboration. So MGX is the Mubadala G42 collaboration. MGX is the one who just led that $65 billion investment in Anthropic, right? So Mubadala and G42 are two investors in Inveniam, and their collaboration, MGX, is the one who made that $2 billion investment in Binance, right? And so we're connected through the parts individually versus through the collaborative, which is the one who invested in Binance directly. And the folks who were there, are super smart, fantastic, very capable people overseeing those investments. But yeah, that's so G42 is our largest investor.
Awesome, that's helpful. So there's another one by Donk Frog. Asking, here we go. So a lot of people, and this is a big one, so we'll just keep it up on the screen for just a second, otherwise it's going to block all of our faces. But a lot of people are asking about what you said on the early access community initiative that we talked about last week, and you gave a little bit more information today. So, basically what you were saying was that Inveniam is opening up a early access initiative that will be effectively a vault, that people can deposit Mantra tokens into, that is then going to be effectively treated at a premium to what it's currently trading at, which is now roughly like 0.83 cents, something like this. And what you're effectively saying is that users and community members who go and access this vault with their Mantra tokens, it doesn't need to be all of your Mantra tokens, it can be some of your Mantra tokens, will be able to get an uplift on their Mantra of more than 3x at this stage, in return for future Inveniam tokens and being part of that layer 2 network on Mantra. Is that a solid assessment of the situation?
That's exactly right. And we want this to be a good trade where there's an immediate uplift. And then from the time that then you guys have Inveniam tokens, at the TGE event, right? So this is going to be coming in effectively into the vault and taking the SAFT, right? The simple agreement for that future token, where the terms and conditions that will be processed, you'll be delivered those tokens in Inveniam, and then hopefully we hope those go to the moon. Do you know what I mean? They'll be the launch, and we're gonna hope that those go and rise. But what we're gonna do is give you a stepped up basis, right? Just because we want to acknowledge that this is a community event, and this is a mechanism for you to participate this in at scale, right? Mantra token will continue to exist. We'll continue to use it in many ways, but what we want you guys to be able to do is participate in this and acknowledge the value that you've had in creating this, and we want everybody to participate in this.
Yeah, and I think one other thing that this kind of stepped up or premium price hopefully enables is also some sort of arbitrage opportunity, because effectively what it is doing is also setting a floor around a potential price. And obviously we don't want to go into too much price speculation, not financial advice ever. But it will be an interesting, frankly, an experiment to see how this plays out in the market. And we'd welcome feedback from the community about what they think. This is obviously a special thing for the Mantra community. It's an early access initiative that others are not going to be getting at these rates. So please do take a peek and take a look. And I think the amount of announcements that are going to be coming over the summer as we build up towards Inveniam, Inveniam, I should say, TGE, and if end of the year is going to be quite exciting. And obviously that's going to start with the Mantra announcement yesterday and continue with the exciting announcement of the Dokugami and Inveniam partnership, I believe in an hour or so.
Yeah, can I answer one of the questions about why not one token that and combine everything instead of multiple tokens, right? Yep. Because they're going to have very different functions. Do you know what I mean? And institutional investors don't want a Swiss Army knife participation. They want to invest in a thing which does a utility that they can make a bet on, right? And we are the agentic utilization of blockchain as it relates to origin, process, and state of data down to the document level that's anchored at the semantic chunk level, that agents will prove not only did I get the right data from the right document, proving through Inveniam, but within the document itself, here's where I got it. And then they can correlate that to other like documents around the world using the core Dokugami DGML markup language. So it's going to have a particular function, and we want people to be able to make a bet. But we're building an ecosystem where people are going to be able to go back one to the other, which is going to hopefully lift all the boats, right? We're using Mantra USD as our form of gas payment, right? And this is very important. This is going to drive real value to Mantra. But we've also, as people have noted, we've made investments in other crypto chains, and we want to keep the functions unique, and we want to build a wide ecosystem that is open so we can bring a lot of builders into our ecosystem, building technologies that use our core infrastructure and stack. That's what we want to be. We want to be a key infrastructure player on the data side, bar none, and then allow these markets to develop. I hope that was a good answer, JP.
No, that's a great answer. And if I may be so bold, one of the responsibilities that you have for me as part of this acquisition, and as part of my new responsibility will be to help craft these value accrual stories to figure out how all these different pieces of the ecosystem go together, and to make sure that we're creating a symbiotic relationship between all the different parties, stakeholders, tokens, etc. That ideally creates a flywheel and value accrual for token holders and stakeholders. Please.
I want to keep going on some of the questions, meaning are all the Mantra things going to continue to exist? And JP, I think the answer to that is absolutely, right? All the
absolutely, that's right.
Words, all that kind of stuff there. We want to encourage more builders on Mantra, more builders on Inveniam chain, more builders on DGML. But these are the integrations of some core technologies to achieve a market outcome. Does that make sense? So these are different technologies that we're integrating together to achieve a market outcome so that we can have commercial success, right? Like that's what it's all about. We got to scratch somebody's itch that they're willing to pay money for, right? And in these technologies integrating together, will deliver that. And what we want to do is literally create an ecosystem of participants where we are going to be good partners with many, many, many other technology creators who are building on our core technologies, right? Into different verticals, into different spaces. But we don't want to be a Swiss Army knife. We want to solve private market data problems and allow private market assets to trade digitally in a systematic manner and aggregate the liquidity pools and facilitate price discovery on these assets around the world. This is what we want to do.
Absolutely. So let's just take maybe two more questions because we are getting to the top of the hour. The first one that I want to call out would be LE3270, what would be the utility of Inveniam token? This is a very easy one because I'm going to punt the answer. We're going to have full tokenomics and kind of utility and use cases and whatnot for Inveniam and the chain coming in the future very soon. So just give us a little bit because we have a proper rollout in GTM that we're following. And part of that is to truly release white papers and tokenomic reports and all these different types of things. I think one other question that would be great to talk about briefly, just because of the time, is Manny Crypt talking about the specific agentic AI use cases. And this was something that we were workshopping yesterday here in Seattle. So maybe we can start talking about a few of these key use cases that are some of our kind of like our hero opportunities. That's for Jean-Paul and Pat, I think.
Yeah, I mean, just think about it. Anything that needs more than two or three parties to be working together. So take an example of a real estate investment trust, and you just need to have their data somewhere, of course, secure and with proof of origin. So investors in a valuation firm can go double check things directly and continuously, not like every 3 months. Just think about it that way. Or another one on somebody who is basically, if you have loans that are backed by some commercial properties and you have research investor funds who want to understand what is the value, try to understand what's in their loan agreements, loan principles, tenant concentration, things like this. So those are very specific examples where you basically have business documents that are owned that represent real assets. And then you have other parties who want to understand in terms of valuation, transcription, understanding, double checking, compliance, conformance. So you have at least two or more parties. And how do you going to do that if you don't have trust? And the trust is at every level. First, you need to be able to trust at the fragment level from where the value came, literally from a scanned PDF, right? Like, it came from page 14, the first few paragraphs. You have to be able to do that for everything. But also you need to make sure that you are keeping that in time, meaning that's where we are to put all of this on blockchain, on chains, right? Because then all of a sudden nobody can come and say, oh, you told me that 3 months ago. Nobody can do that. That's why I'm excited to work with those two gentlemen here, because we literally are creating a new database layer that is fully decentralized.
And the reality is this decentralized database where people control their own data, but they relate themselves to a distributed decentralized database because they've indexed, vector embedded, semantically chunked their data, anchored that on chain and then allowing agents to interact with their data in a manner that doesn't leak their data to the whole world, right? This is enormously valuable. And as we do this has a unique, discrete function. And that is not the same function that Mantra Markets and Mantra USD and Mantra FZE have, which is a unique function that we must interact with, but they're different. And I want to use an example that everybody knows, right? You go back to the Microsoft Intel, dominance. And there was a ton of people who used Microsoft and Intel in their laptops in the explosion of, whether it was Lenovo, Gateway, Dell, et cetera, who are manufacturers who needed to package that technology in. But many, Microsoft looked at building chips and they didn't do a good job of it. Intel looked at building software, they didn't do a good job of it. Sun Microsystems, which was maybe the best, and they wanted to all internalize it and they wanted to do everything. And the problem is they were fighting Microsoft, they were fighting Intel, and they were fighting IBM at the same time. And eventually, what did they do? They lost because they didn't have a thing. We want to build a community that incentivizes behavior, that we will excel in discrete functions, in the market functions with MF markets, in Mantra FZE, in Mantra USD. That's got to have a native token to incentivize the builders to continue that thing, to not be neglected internally. Inveniam, we're going to have an Inveniam token that is the agentic solution that is going to plug in. Jean-Paul and Dakugami, these functions, we need to be globally leading and cutting edge, not for a minute, but for the next 20 years. And to do that, you need people to make bets that are incentivized to support the behavior of a certain activity. And then collectively, how can they do that? And that was a great question about Inveniam stock, and maybe we'll figure something out about floating something like that on Mantra FZE. But the reality is, this is what we need to do. We need people to be able to incentivize discrete behaviors that don't get neglected because they're in a collective, and we're fighting a battle on 30 different fronts. No, we want an ecosystem where there is development, each role being totally unique.
Absolutely. Let's just do one more question because it's been asked if we could respond to it twice, and that's from Alex 72RAFG. Which was, I think, what you were kind of getting at a little bit, Pat, but I just want to call this one out because I think it's a good question. It basically says, with all respect, does Mantra token have any chance to recover if Inveniam token is promoted instead? I think Pat said a good stage there, but I'd just like to maybe cap it off. I would actually flip that around and say the best chance for Mantra to recover is for Inveniam as a whole and what we're building together to be promoted. Because, as Pat mentioned earlier, rising tide does lift all boats. But not only that, the best way for us to recover, in my opinion, is twofold. One, and most importantly, is traction and usage, and truly building that community of developers and builders who are going to be using this technology, who are going to be transacting on chain, who are going to be, paying gas in things like Mantra USD, in Mantra, et cetera. That will then create value accrual flywheels for the Mantra token, for Inveniam token, et cetera. These are all important things that if we don't have that traction, frankly, there's no chance to recover because it's all pure speculation, number one. Number two, I think slightly less important, but also still relevant, is this expands our narrative. This expands our focus and our use case around not just being purely RWA, but also moving in this whole broader sphere of private market assets as well as agentic finance. This is a massive sector, and this is an opportunity to be not a leader for a few minutes, a leader for 20 years, which we're building together. And I think, those things in combination are what will make, all these things that we're working on successful. And then that clear alignment across the stakeholders between Mantra, Inveniam, Dakigami, and the ecosystem that we're collectively developing is how this is going to work and work out successfully in the end. So hopefully that answers the question, Alex. But I do think that's a good way to end this space and community AMA on. Appreciate Jean and Pat for coming on. Appreciate all the community members from literally all over the world. I think we really dug into a lot of stuff. We talked about the deal. We talked about this early access community initiative happening next week. We talked about some alpha there, as well as with Dakigami and the announcement coming out in the next hour or so. So be on the lookout for that. And thank you everyone for attending. It's been a good one, a little bit of a longer one than normal, but I think it was well warranted. So thanks everyone for showing up. Appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.